Welcome everyone. In this video, I'm going to look at Broadcom and Nvidia. Particularly, I want to analyze whether Broadcom is going to be able to take some market share from Nvidia, and if so, by how much. So I'm going to look at what Wall Street expects for both of these companies. I'm going to look at the fundamentals of Nvidia, Broadcom, AMD as well. And I'm going to look, of course, at the charts because you can see that the setup for Broadcom is quite favorable. You can see a breakout. And of course, right now, there is a big chance the price is going to possibly consolidate around the low 300s, but I wouldn't be surprised to see a bounce on this support level, and from there, it takes off. So I'm quite bullish on Broadcom. That doesn't mean that I'm not bullish on Nvidia. I'm bullish on both companies. If you look at the chart for Nvidia, the price is consolidating after a spectacular bull run. In fact, if you look at the lows in April, the stock doubled, in 6 months. So of course, you are likely to see a pullback like the one we're seeing right now. So a consolidation is actually, in my opinion, a positive factor for the next bull run that is going to take off. So let's look at some of the things. And I want to start first with an XPU. I got to say, I was new to the topic. So an XPU, all right, the X in XPU can be a G, a T, or a D. All right, so that can be a custom GPU, TPU, or DPU. And essentially, it's everything except a CPU. Right, and what Broadcom does with the XPUs, the company co-designs with hyperscalers these custom AI accelerators. Okay, so if, let's say, OpenAI, they want a custom chip that, unlike Nvidia's, which is, let's say a general AI accelerator, let's say that OpenAI wants this custom AI chip to do a certain task very well. For example, inferencing. So if you want to excel at inferencing, you need a special, a custom solution, and that's where Broadcom comes into place. And, given that OpenAI and the entire industry predicts that, consumers and particularly enterprises are going to adopt AI, I think there is a very good chance that we're going to see chips gravitating towards a specialization in inferencing, because training is the first step, okay? But once you have an AI that's trained, okay, now you have to give it to the users, and the users, they have to use it. And when you use an AI, particularly for tasks like this one that you see on the screen, which, I'm using ChatGPT 5, the thinking mode, which is, the paid version. Of course, you have a lot of tokens that are being used, and that's an inferencing task. So it makes sense for OpenAI to start tiptoeing into custom AI chips. And I do see a trend that's quite favorable for the next few years. So it makes sense, in my opinion, for Broadcom to be where it is right now. And I have to say that it's one of these quiet companies, like nobody was expecting, nobody even heard about Broadcom until, a few weeks ago. Like I was made aware of where Broadcom was, I think like a month and a half ago, when I realized that the company entered the $1 trillion market cap. I mean, if I have a look at Seeking Alpha, the company is 1.5. How much is the market cap? 1.6 trillion market cap. You can't ignore this company. In fact, it has more market cap than Tesla. So I think this is going to be the 8th in the Magnificent Seven. And I do think that XPUs are going to take some market share from Nvidia. Now, if I look at what Wall Street expects for Broadcom over the next few years, this year, not much. All right. So we've already seen in the previous video, I did a coverage on Broadcom, and I've shown that, those XPUs, the 10 billion order from OpenAI is only going to start, to deliver next year. So until then, the company is relatively stuck at, a sad double-digit growth. Of course, many companies are going to kill for this growth rates that you see on the screen. So this year, the expectation is for 23% year-over-year growth on the top line. Next year, we have 32%. And here is where things get very interesting. Let's look at NVIDIA. So NVIDIA, this year, the growth is ridiculous. Okay, so 58% year-over-year. 206 billion. I mean, it's just ridiculous to grow that much considering that revenue. Okay, that's not easy to do. But next year, check this out, 32%, which is pretty much the same as Broadcom. And don't consider that Broadcom has a lower revenue, but it's not like 3 billions. You know, it's not like, for example, AMD's. Let me open the estimations for AMD. So if you look at AMD, you know, 30 billion. Nothing. It's nothing compared to Nvidia's 206 this year or Broadcom's 83 next year. So I think this growth rate is quite legit, and it's pretty much the same as Nvidia. So it does seem that Broadcom is going to gain some traction in the top line for these XPUs. There was an article released on Seeking Alpha, and I have here a very interesting summary. And one of the bullet points of the summary, it was saying that over 65%, let me see if I find it, there it is. So 65% of the Broadcom AI revenue in the third quarter was due to the XPU mix, right? That's, as I said before in my video, two sides, yeah? On the positive side, you have a lot of revenue. On the negative side, XPUs are currently diluting margins, gross margins. And the reason is because the company has to pass on the costs of the HBM memory to the consumers. And that's not very attractive from a margin perspective. So the top line looks fine. And looking at the bottom line, well, it looks very good as well, don't get me wrong. 38% year-over-year growth this year, 34% next year. The bottom line looks fine. The problem with the bottom line is that the share price is too high for, we're talking about how much this year? $6 per share in earnings, and the share price is 345. So, of course, you're going to have a ridiculous P ratio over 100, So, on that side, the bottom line is not as attractive as for Nvidia, where Nvidia is making per share about $4 this year. However, the price is less than half. So the multiple looks way more attractive for Nvidia. For AMD, it's less attractive than Nvidia, but more attractive than Broadcom. So they make about $4 per share for a price of $150. So yeah, there you have the multiples. Now, going back to this summary, so if we go to the details, Broadcom added a fourth XPU customer in the last earnings call, and it all points out that that's OpenAI, and they talked about a 10 billion AI rack order that is secured for next year. So it seems that OpenAI is possibly Project Titan, although the company didn't confirm who the client is and what the XPUs are going to be used for. But you have a lot of analysts from Wells Fargo, Morgan Stanley that are already speculating about possibly inferencing use cases, and the customer most likely being OpenAI. So the stock moves on Friday looked very interesting. AMD was down mid-single digit, Nvidia low single digit, and Broadcom up by double digit. So this is the very first sign that the market is already considering, is really Nvidia, do they really have a moat? And how about AMD? And yes, of course, you can say GPU, GPU, we're talking about the GB300, so that's an entire rack scale system. And if you consider that with the CUDA software, of course, you have a very strong moat. But if you now have to focus at inferencing tasks, which are very specific, let's say that you don't care about training, you only care about inferencing, then maybe, and if you are very sensitive on costs, you may be interested in considering Broadcom's XPUs. And that's one of the reasons why the market sold off. Of course, it's just an overreaction as always. However, it's a hint that Broadcom is there saying hi, and these two guys are not very happy about it. So Looking at the overall outlook, the company raised guidance for fiscal 26, and they said that AI revenue is going to improve significantly versus the last quarter. Speaking of growth, let's have a look at the AI segment of the company. So, as you know, the company Broadcom reports revenue in two different segments. You have semiconductors and you have infrastructure. Within semiconductor, all right, you have two categories. You have AI products and non-AI products. And of course, if you take into account both of them, the growth rate was 26%. Okay, it's not bad. The chart looks, sorry, I don't think you can see it. Maybe you can see now. The chart looks really good, yeah? So you can, since mid last year, you can see double-digit growth ticking up, which is perfect. If you have a closer look at the earnings call, within that within the semiconductor segment, AI products, right? They made up 5.2% of the revenue, and that was up by 63% year over year. So this is the value that the market is looking at, because you don't care about non-AI semiconductor products. Those are mainly, the wireless chips that are used in smartphones, particularly in Apple's smartphones. So you don't really care that much about that, and you're more focused on what's going on in the AI semiconductor segment. So that growth is really good. In fact, it's really similar to Nvidia's growth in the past quarter. I think I had here a chart. There you go. So the data center revenue in Q2 fiscal 26, it was 56%, right? So Broadcom, the AI segment of Broadcom, it was up by 66%. Of course, you have to put the figures into context. That was just, this is the guidance. This is the actual value. So it was only 5.2 billion in Q2. The guidance for Q3, Broadcom's guidance in Q3 is 6.2 billion, which is up 66% year over year. And this implies that the segment, the AI segment of Broadcom, is growing at a faster pace than Nvidia. So this is something to take into account, because maybe you're going to have some investors that have the fatigue of Nvidia. Everybody's talking about them. Everybody is already used to this stock. And maybe people are going to be looking for that outlier that, possibly is going to surprise everyone. And I do like the idea of custom XPUs that are designed for AI inferencing tasks, because one of the main limits on building data centers right now are are power contracts. So if you can minimize the amount of power that you spend per token, that alone is already a very strong case to go with Broadcom. So looking at AMD, the company's growth in the data center, computing and the data center revenue, it's 14%, and that's really bad. I've already shown in my previous coverage on AMD. The company relies a lot on China. And I think the headwind to the top line was about 7 billion. If you were to include 7 billion in this guidance, I think growth will be in the mid-30s approximately. So company relies too much on China, and I'm not happy by the fact that they're not developing a custom chip for China, which is an upgrade from the old MI308. So the MI308 was good, comparing to Nvidia's H20. The problem is that Nvidia is working on the B30A, and that's a Blackwell-based GPU. So if AMD is staying on the sidelines, doing nothing in China, I think the company is going to be wiped out in that region. And I think the Chinese companies, and Alibaba is going to go to Nvidia's B30As instead of spending money on, obsolete MI308s. So I'm not that bullish on AMD in this regard, even though I do believe that the share price is going to go up. There is just a pullback. We had a pullback in mid-August, which seems to be normal, a seasonal effect. So, it's noise. It's going to go up. But I'm not that confident in a time frame of 3 years, or 5 years. I'm not that confident that AMD is going to be where it is today. All right, so moving on to other points from the article. So the company Broadcom, they had 3 existing customers, and they noted another one, a fourth one, which seems to be that OpenAI. And I think in total, the company is addressing a market of 7 players. They don't want to mess around with too many hyperscalers or data center infrastructure companies. And that's great because they're just focusing on a few hopefully high margin, because XPUs are currently diluting margins. But I really want to see how margins are going to look going forward. So far, if we look at gross margins, the trend is not very concerning. So let's have a look to their margins, gross profit margin. You see, the trend looks fine. Yes, there is a stagnation since the beginning of the year, but 67%, it's not bad. The only problem that I see with Broadcom is that as revenue, particularly in the 10 billion contract with OpenAI, as that revenue is going to go up, I'm worried that these gross margins are going to go down because of the effect that these XPUs have. So this is one of the main points I have in the bear case for Broadcom. And overall, I think the breakout has motivated more people to just jump in. The shares are up by 3% today, which is crazy after a run. I think they went up by 10% on Friday. So yeah, let's see if it pulls back, and hopefully we can catch. Well, I can catch the stock hopefully here in the low 300s. So overall, I do think that XPUs are going to take market share. I think the street is already projecting. I mean, just have a look at Nvidia. If you look at the year, this is the fiscal. So fiscal 28 is calendar 27, all right? The growth is 17%. If you look at Broadcom, the street projects growth at 26%. So that's 10 percentage points more than Nvidia. So it seems to me, and just take a look here. In October 29, this is Broadcom, yeah? October 29, the street projects 44% increase in the... Sorry, this is the bottom line. Let's have a look at the top line. Yes, so, sorry, I mixed the two. So this is the EPS. I'm looking at the revenue. So revenue, again, 17% for 2027. And Broadcom, 23%. So that's more. In October, we have 20% for Broadcom in the year ending October 28. For Nvidia, this is fiscal 29, so calendar 28, it's only 10%. And then in 2029, it's only 8%. So you can see that the growth, it's only going down from here. And for Broadcom, the year 2029, they expect 26% increase in revenue. I have to admit that there are only 2 analysts estimating this, so maybe this is not as accurate. But overall, it tells me that there is some upside, especially in the near term. I mean, this growth is legit. So my view, it's really simple. If you want to see deep dives on each of these 3 stocks, feel free to check my videos. I did a very recent coverage on all these 3 stocks. So I believe all 3 are going to go up. Okay, there is no freaking doubt about that. There is a lot of CapEx spend in terms of hyperscalers. So if that goes up next year, especially we're going to see that in the next earnings season, I think the CapEx revisions are going to go to the upside, especially when compared to 25. I do think that these 3 players are going to ride the wave, but in the very long run, I mean, until the end of the decade, I think Broadcom is significantly better positioned than Nvidia. And the share price is stretched. And even if they do a reverse split, a split, the valuations will remain the same, So it's not that if the price goes down to, let's say, $34 per share, it's not that the valuation is going to look better. It's going to be exactly the same. However, I don't know, it will make it easier for retail to jump in. So I wouldn't be surprised if there is such an announcement for the company, which I think it will be a catalyst for Nvidia. That happened in 2024, at the beginning of 24, and that was a 10-to-1. So the share price of Nvidia today should have been 1,700, to give you an idea, if they didn't do that split. So yeah, that's my view. Let me know your comments. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section, and I see you next one.